Hello and welcome to this episode of the Digital Disruption Podcast, brought to you by Novus Strategy and Consulting with Pete Gatenby and myself, Chris Williams. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about building societies and the impact and role that building societies play on the UK home buying sector. We're fresh back from the Building Society Association conference just over a week or so ago, where we discovered a lot about the challenges being faced. And in this episode, we're going to deep dive into some of those challenges in an attempt to share with you how you can overcome them. Hello, mate.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Yeah, good.
Tired?
Yeah, tired. And summer's finally here, which is nice.
Summer is here. So, busy couple of weeks since our last episode. Today, we're going to be talking specifically about building societies. So, we'll get straight into it. Your main takeaways from the Building Society Association conference. What was the big takeaways for yourself?
The big ones really are all about interoperability. Now we talk about it a lot, but building societies are really beginning to come up against this in the industry. And what became super apparent to me is they're looking to the marketplace for support. They're looking, whenever they're making their buying decisions, they're making their technology decisions, they're making their decisions about who they're going to drop into their team or even their consulting partners. That's one of the big deciding factors that they're starting to factor in. So that was a huge one for me. What about yourself?
Interoperability obviously was the key one that came out in the conversations, of course, that we had. I think the other thing that stood out for me was the importance of understanding the readiness for digital transformation, because there's one thing that stood out from a number of the conversations, even with vendors, was that there's a lot of vendors that are obviously delivering vertical services. Maybe it's origination, maybe it's decisioning, whatever it is. But getting those vendors to interoperate and move into a workflow, there's clearly challenges in that. And
Absolutely.
So there's a buying decision that gets taken, there's vendor selection that goes through, and no doubt there's an element of digital maturity assessment that takes place. But what seems to be missing is a level of auditing to understand, well, what's our readiness and what's our capability to ensure that we go at this at a good pace.
100%. And what we're seeing, and I know a lot of the building sites that I spoke to are undertaking quite big transformation programs now, whether that's changing their core banking platform, possibly a once in a generation program within a building society. And the reasons they're making these decisions is often due to legacy tech stacks that might sit within their core banking platform that they have at the moment. But then and it's all about prepping themselves for to be technically ready to react to the market or deliver a better customer experience by being able to offer new products or even new service lines to support their members.
Definitely. I think the other one that stood out to me as well a little bit was there was an intersection around mobile, and I think the importance of that small screen at the end of the day and the customer experience at that front end. I think overarching everything, I think there's been some definite gains. I thought there were some great vendors. There was a lot of vendors. And I felt that there were some fantastic products, services across the board, great innovations. Again, missing is this connectivity between some of those. And I think it's really important that vendors, really look at themselves, not just as a vertical stack, but left and right, how can I connect into other vendors? How horizontally can we do this? And talking to some of the vendors there, it was clear that they're open to that and wanting to go on that journey. Moving on from that, let's deep dive a little bit into interoperability and perhaps approach. What approach should building societies be doing, and what are the things that they can do if they're coming up against interoperability challenges? Getting perhaps maybe legacy systems to talk to one another, new stacks to talk to one another, well, not necessarily new stacks, but new vendors, and so on and so forth. What's the best approach for them to be going through to try to sort of accelerate that? Because that was certainly a pain point that was coming across.
Yeah, so you touched on readiness first and foremost. I think having a clear understanding of your current readiness as an organisation is super important. I know we talk about this and do this with building sites as a service that we offer, right? But it's super important because if you understand where you are today and where your capabilities are, but also where your gaps are, where you need vendors to perhaps step in and support, that's really important when you start making those vendor selection decisions and when you go through those RFP, RFI processes. It kind of informs the buying decision that's made. Once you understand what that looks like, then you can start to capability map your vendors. Now, that capabilities could be from a service offering, or it could actually be from a sort of tech delivery standpoint and whatever the product is that they're dropping into you. So, for example, if you're dropping in a new front end because you're reskinning something and you've got a provider providing that, are they going to be able to work alongside your current banking platform or your mortgage origination platform, whatever that might be, right? And then once it gets to the sort of larger systems, where's the crossover? Because some of these systems, they might have crossovers in different areas. There might be modules within your banking platform that might do mortgage origination, but you might have a specialist mortgage origination for a specialised products that you offer as a building society. And so it's really key to understand where that crossover is from a service and product delivery standpoint. And then when it comes to almost your strategic delivery partners, and when you start delivering alongside perhaps other vendors in the market, it's really key to get around the table, align on, I guess, the North Star of whatever a program of work might be, so that you can, well, alignment is obviously clearly very important, but also so that you can then have super open communication about what needs to be done to achieve that North Star, and clear lines in the stand about where the responsibility is, where the shared responsibility is, and therefore what the reporting cadence might be on delivery of certain aspects of a program. So I've done a quick whistle-stop tour of a few things there, but what else do you think we're missing?
There's a couple of things actually. One thing that you noted there was RFI, RFP processes. My invitation to societies and mutuals would be actually when embarking on digital transformation programs and RFI, RFP processes, these are quite old-fashioned ways of vendor selection. That's not to say that they don't work.
I don't like them.
No, I know you don't. But I think there's a way to mature this to a more modern way of vendor selection, and that is to run proof of concepts, collaborate more, and look at and get your vendors to start to collaborate as part of the process. Yeah. At the end of the day, this isn't a selection that you can reverse out of easily. Yeah. It's something that you have to do, that you're kind of committed to. You're backing a horse in a race. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, these are enabling and empowering your organisation, and they're mission critical, if truth be told. And so with that in mind, I think it's really important for them to perhaps maybe look at alternative ways of selection, and to keep the RFI, RFP type models that enable you to apply that high level of governance and due diligence, compliance, etc., but introduce something that's a bit more agile, a bit more lean, where you can actually sort of proof of concept and run some sort of test. That'd be the first thing.
Yeah, and I also kind of want to build on that. I think my flippant comment of I don't like them is for twofold. I've seen them be done so badly.
100%. I mean, they are damaging in some instances. Let's not beat about the bush.
Yeah, and I've seen them, especially when we were going for large consultancy engagements, when I've been part of like big RFPs, where there's a dictation from the RFP process to tick certain boxes to deliver certain milestones that actually puts the organisation down a path that limits either collaboration or innovation, and it limits the consultative ability of the supplier because of the way they're structured. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a one-size-fits-all, but I think it's just an invitation to be super wary that when you're going through or structuring an RFP, be careful what you ask for. I understand the need for RFP to put weight in towards certain metrics and to protect the business and make sure that rogue procurement teams are not doing the wrong thing and doing it right by the business. But be careful, because if you are asking very intelligent people to do a certain thing, they'll do the certain thing. If you ask them to solve this problem, and you're open about receiving different ways of doing that, you're going to get a very different answer to do this thing. because to do this thing, anybody could do this thing, whatever A, B, C. I mean, we always go back to the mentality of, if you ask someone to build a wall, that's great, but the smart consultants will go away and work out exactly where that wall needs to be and why it needs to exist there, and
how high, how
wide. But if you're going down an RFP, and I've seen RFPs very much do this, they'll say we need a wall that's 2 foot thick and is 10 meters long, just at the end of the garden. That's exactly where it needs to go. But actually, if the problem to be solved is to actually we're just trying to stop dog escaping, then you might not need a wall that big.
Yeah.
And you see, that's kind of a bit of a loose analogy, but you see where RFPs can become a little bit unstuck sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. The second one for me was kind of really about the auditing piece. I think as you talking to some of these societies and in and around their challenges that they're facing, doing an audit of the estate is an obvious thing to do, and they will have already done some level of audit. And let me just explain what I mean by that. They obviously know what their capabilities, the existing platform, what the the new ones are, where the gaps are, so on and so forth. But the audit of readiness and doing that properly is really important, because you can assess the gaps and you can really accelerate these. You can really accelerate a transformation, and it's hard to kind of do that when you're in flight. Because ultimately, the pressure's on. So that's the other thing. And I think I'd probably just add one other to that. Something else that stood out to me was accessibility to talent, because there's lots of really smart, talented people across, the home buying sector and across industries, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 lenders. There's lots of talent out there. But actually accessing specific key SMEs with specific capabilities in order to kind of support transformation in key areas, that started to shine through as something that was perhaps maybe problematic, because the hiring protocols and the hiring processes to gain access to talent are just going through a very traditional route, which is, here's a job spec, is hand to a recruiter, go and find somebody. We're in a world now where we should be looking at the problem and then assessing which people it is that you need to add to the problem. And I think that would be one for me to sort of, go back to, or to sort of help people who are on that journey, is to say, look, when you're looking at your challenges, hence going back to the audit for a second, going back to the RFP process, when you're looking at the landscape and what it is that you're trying to do, it's at that point that part of that process should be looking at these are the problems. What kind of people are going to help us solve these problems? A recruiter cannot answer that question for you. Yeah. And so it's really important that you've got the right people around you to enable that, because it's people that are going to drive this transformation forward. And I think there's some great ambition in this space and within that group. And I was really pleased to see that. And I think there's some great opportunities there. And I hope that some of the things that we've just spoken about are beneficial to people.
One other thing I noticed a lot at the conference, and this was interestingly occasionally when we were wandering around the exhibition hall, where you had a lot of vendors exhibiting. Now, we weren't exhibiting; we were there visiting.
Well, I did a little bit with one of our clients. I thought.
Well, that's true. Actually, yeah,
I even gave a little talk.
You did, yeah. You gave a talk on behalf of that. It was good, actually. You did quite well. But when I was wandering around and I was chatting to just some of the exhibitors, find out about what they did and how they were finding the event. One of the things that I found really refreshing, actually, is how collaborative vendors are now looking.
Yep.
We talk about this interoperability piece a lot. Of course we do, because it's super important. But vendors are actually getting there as fast, if not faster, than some of the building societies themselves. And they're starting to realise that in order to deliver the best service for whatever their product line is or whatever their service line is, that they need to collaborate with other suppliers in the market as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a counter to that. I think some of the more what I would describe as fintechs seem like that. I think some of the more incumbents didn't necessarily look as
you might have been on the other side of the room to me.
Well, I don't know. Because I've seen it in accounts, and I can see, I'm not going to call. We're agnostic, so I'm not going to start sort of calling vendors out. But There were some that definitely are,
Yep.
and I think they are cloud native. They're reasonably new.
Yeah.
Certainly 4, 5, 6 years old, versus perhaps some of the more incumbent providers that are kind of stalwarts in the industry, who are less so. Now that's not everybody. Certainly,
Definitely.
that there are organisations out there that are definitely up for collaboration. But as in some of the origination space, for example, there didn't seem to be, certainly some of the conversations I had were like, there are most definitely challenges between that platform there and this thing over here, and trying to get them to kind of interconnect and operate seemed to be challenging. And there was a couple of, sort of, private conversations held in and around that, and there was most definitely issues there. So I think you're right, but I still think there's a way to go, and there's definitely some of the old, the other organisations.
There's a culture, a closed loop culture.
A little bit, yeah. And that might just be a handful, but yeah, there's more to be done.
Protecting their farm, right?
Yeah, but I think here's the thing. Going back to your point, though, it was great to see that there is a high level of collaboration desire amongst vendors. I think there's a great opportunity to facilitate more in that, and I know we've spoken about that, and the role that we can play in trying to support that, in terms of trying to get those types of co-creation sessions together, because we see challenges through a different lens, and we see it very holistically, and vendors, they're operating in a vertical a lot of the time, so trying to get that holistic picture. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there, and I guess there's an invitation there actually as well. I mean, we've spoken about this. If you are a vendor in this space and you are looking at, well, how can we become more interoperable? How can we cooperate more? We'd like a bigger holistic picture of what's going on. Come and talk to us, because we're happy to kind of, collaborate and co-create and look at that and explore the art of the possible. At the end of the day, our vision and mission is to leave this world in a better place than how we found it, using technology. In this particular vertical. That's why we're here, and it's to help people do that, because the experts are, we're experts in what we do, but there's people there that know this industry inside out and the built technology within it, and then of course you've got your lenders and vendors and etc. We've got a holistic picture that we can share with people to help bring that together, and I think that's an opportunity. And so that collaboration piece is key, and it's great to see that people are there, and I think we've got a role to play in that as well.
Definitely. And I also think that vendors often feel the pain and see some of the problems that perhaps lenders don't see at the activation of a program layer. I mean, we had a conversation, right, where we've got these problems from a change support standpoint, and there is no provision in the program to support, and so they were almost looking for help and support in terms of how do we support this change and transformation within the building society, really to deliver a better service for the members at the end of the day. But actually, the biggest problem was, how do we land this change and transformation successfully into the building society itself? And that's just one example, right? Because they're seeing the pain firsthand. As we said, sometimes these platform changes or big technology deployments are once in a generation, and so vendors see it before the lenders do, and therefore that's why sometimes this collaboration happening as well. It's like, actually, let's get ahead of the game here, because we've been down this path once before, twice before, 3 times before. We know how it ends. Let's change the narrative and change the script a little bit.
Well, I think we touched on some really good stuff there to help people. In summary, big takeaways really are interoperability. We understand that's a challenge, and it's going to be there. Key to getting around that is collaborate, and actually then falls into the second one takeaway, which is audit. Really look at your estate and say, as part of the vendor selection process, specifically, even if you're in flight, but specifically before you start. But if most of these guys are going to be in flight, in flight, you can actually look at the systems and say, well, okay, let's audit this stuff. Let's see what needs to communicate, and how we're going to make that happen, and how can we accelerate that. If you want any help, you know where we are. That third one we touched on was the RFP, RFI process. It's important we get it, but perhaps maybe look at how you can introduce co-creation sessions and proof of concepts with the people that you're going through the selection process with, to see how they can interoperate and look at these challenges in advance. And I think they were the big key takeaways really for me. Anything else you would add?
No, I think we've covered it.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so that concludes this episode of the Digital Disruption Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. All that remains to be said is, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do like and share, as it helps us in understanding which content you like. Equally, if there are specific topics you'd like us to cover, please do get in touch. And then finally, if there's anything in this episode that you'd like to talk to us about, don't hesitate to get in touch anywhere on our website, novus-strategy.com, or connect directly with us on LinkedIn. But for now, thanks for listening, and we'll talk and see you again soon.
Thanks a lot.